Hello, this is Noisy, and this video is all about KNPP body kits. I'll be showing you how to dump your chosen car from Kino and then preparing the car in Blender. I'll be showing you UV unwrapping, including seams, how to mark them and how they're used. I'll be showing origin points and how to set them for your parts. And once everything is in Unity, I'll be showing you the naming schemes and how to prepare each of the models ready for the KNPP. So the very first thing I'm going to do is put a body kit onto the car. What this does is it gives us a guide for where to do the UV unwrapping, and it also works as a scale reference so we can make our body kit the correct dimensions. If your car of choice has the option, you should choose a bonnet that has this style of venting on it, and you'll see why when we get to the UV unwrapping stage. Also, if you have the option, you should choose a spoiler or wing that has the option for body paint to be applied to it, because while the in-game livery editor doesn't have the option, you can actually put liveries on this type of wing. And once again, we'll see where exactly that is on the UV map once we get to that part. So now I've chosen all my body kit parts. I'm going to go to Kino, Tools, Car Dumper, Dump Full Model and Livery. And we'll just call this Tutorial and click OK. That should be dumped. Now we're in Blender. Any version of Blender is fine for what we're doing. We're going to import OBJ, browse to our car dumps folder, import. Here's our model, and thanks to the new version of Kino, we have all of these routes available, and these are going to help us later when it comes to locating the origins for each of the body parts. We can start off by hiding all of these routes. We can also hide stitches and the miscellaneous parts, so we're left with the body and the glass. The very first thing we should do is select our body mesh, tab into edit mode. We're going to drag this top corner across so it gives us an extra window to work with. We'll choose UV editor, and pressing A, we highlight everything, and this is our UV map. We need to give our new parts UV maps according to this layout. Because of where CARX modding is right now, the rear fender, roof, and front fender of the S13, for example, these parts of the UV mesh cannot be edited in any way. They need to remain where they are. This is because you cannot change these parts in game. They're going to be permanent. So we need to make our parts around these, basically. You'll also notice that because I chose this bonnet, there's a big hole here, and those vents are pushed out above where the bonnet is. If we chose the stock bonnet, we wouldn't be able to see that. So because we're able to see this part of the UV map being used, we know not to put anything that we make into this area. Same goes with the wing. We can see that it takes up a lot of space down here, and we need to locate our parts around this. We'll want to use this UV layout as a reference in the future, so we can go to UV, export UV layout, and I'll just find a folder to put it in. S13 UV layout, and we'll make it about 2000. This gives us a nice amount of detail on the image. Now what we can start doing is, in faces mode, we'll use the L key to select our parts of the front bumper. I'm going to press P and separate by selection. Now for the side skirts, and I'll just quickly rename these. Grab the bonnet as well. Grab the wing. So now that the car is split into convenient parts, you can now start making your own body kit. Import a kit that is already fitted to the CARX model, or import a body kit that needs to be reshaped. If you want to learn how to reshape body kits to fit to CARX models, I will show you all of my techniques in a separate video located in the description. Otherwise, wait a couple of seconds and this D-Max body kit will have been magically fitted to the S13. Okay, I have returned with a body kit ready on the S13. All of the meshes that I'm going to be turning into body parts which will receive liveries are on their own separate mesh. They have the suffix _body just for easier identification. And the paintable surface is separated from the non-paintable surfaces. As a demonstration on the spoiler, I'm going to grab all of those faces, P to separate. I'll rename this one SP Body. I'll click this button and remove unused slots. It is important that the faces that receive liveries only have one material, and that one material is going to be what we use, that UV map that we created earlier. Base color, image texture, open. Here is our layout. As you can see, the body is lining up pretty well. The bonnet is lining up pretty well because I did use a stock bonnet to merge with the vents, and everything else is going to need UV unwrapping. Before I get started unwrapping, obviously all of my mirror modifiers need to be applied on all of these meshes because we don't want to have mirror images when we put decals on our car. We'll start with the bonnet because it's going to be the most simple to unwrap. This one is going to be similar to the stock bonnet in that I want to separate the vents and the inside here so that it unwraps nicely in the UV map. To help with visibility, I'm going to turn off my sharps up here, and that way I can see where I'm making my seams. We're going to select these edges, right click, mark seam, and the seam is indicated by the red line. So I've gone through and I've marked seams around the tops of each of these vent holes. As it stands now, this won't unwrap properly, and I'll show you why. If we unwrap there, we can see that it produces these weird circles because what's happening is the inside of this loop doesn't have a seam to turn it into a strip. If we were to go through and mark seams running from the bottom up to our perimeter seam, and then do an unwrap. Now each of these shapes can turn into strips. Our unwrap method can change to conformal, and it varies. Sometimes it'll change the shape of these, sometimes it won't, but this is fine. Now I can begin arranging these UV islands. These ones are pretty generous in that they will simply slot together and maximize our space usage. This one isn't quite the same shape, but we can easily grab these vertices here. Using proportional editing, we can use connected only and smooth. We'll just slot these in here using the scroll wheel to adjust the size of our proportion. I want to scale this in a bit, move it a bit, and that's using the space as effectively as possible. Do the same for this one. Can probably scale that down a bit. Cool. We'll grab all of these and we'll move them into the area where bonnet vents generally go. I can grab the bonnet itself. Move that to fit over the existing one. And this extra piece here, I'll scale down, and this can just slot in somewhere around here. What makes a good UV unwrap is that the faces of the unwrap retain their proportions as best as possible to the mesh itself. This will prevent any pixelation or stretching of any decals that get put on the car later. So now I'm on the front bumper, and as with the bonnet, I've put seams around the perimeters of each of the holes and introduced a slit, so each of these turns into a strip. Let's see how this unwraps. Conformal, not very good. It pinches off in these corners and the proportion is lost. Let's try angle base. That's also not very good. It's still pinching. What should we do? We can try introducing seams that run down the front corners. So now I've run some seams down those front corners. How does it unwrap now? Not as bad, but it's still pinching off a bit in these corners here. So what I'll try is running a seam from the seam that runs around the indicator and bring it out to this vertical seam on both sides. Now that those seams are created, how does it unwrap now? That's better. It creates a split here, which gives these faces the ability to break away and stretch out in a better proportion. I can tell you with certainty that this is the front bumper because this is the exhaust and number plate cutout for the rear bumper. So obviously front bumper goes up there. So when it comes to the front bumper UV, the most important parts are going to be this part for the main front and these edge bits around the corners. So I'm going to slot this into there. Grab these, give them a spin. The big open hole strip needs to be resized just slightly. All really just a game of Tetris. We're packing in all of these UV islands as best as we can into the space provided, so we have more room for the rest of the parts to the UV unwrap. It's important that we don't have any overlapping faces and our UVs don't interact with other parts of the car. We also want to have a little bit of a margin around each of these UV islands. This will prevent pixel bleeding. Now these side skirts don't have any holes in them, but we'll still apply some seams because the way they unwrap now is messing with our proportions. So we need to introduce some seams so that it unfolds a bit better. What's going to speed up the process for the side skirts is I can easily delete everything on one side, mark all my seams on this side. I'm going to add a mirror modifier, apply it, and now all the seams on one side have been carried across to the other. Now how does it unwrap? Much better. I'm going to scale one side down so it fits in its location. And since they're the same size, I can just easily grab this one and put it over into its location. Rear bumper, pretty straightforward. I'm going to put a seam around the outside of the exhaust cutout. I've got one on the perimeter of the number plate. The back face is going to have a seam around it as well. I want to isolate this. And I've also got two seams on the corners up on the front. That unwraps like so. Since I isolated that back part of the number plate cutout, I can maximize space by putting it straight into here. Grab everything, scale them together, and these can go down in the corner. Wing is pretty straightforward too. I've isolated each of these ends of the plate with the strip up the middle having a seam to turn it into a strip. And I've run a seam along the front and back of the blade. So now I have these nice long flat parts and I can lay everything down on the bottom here. Now Zerlo has graciously provided some fenders to go with this D-Max body kit. And the way these are constructed is because there are split faces in the mesh, it's going to produce a UV map that looks like this. Fortunately enough, these are in quads. And what we can do to maximize space is select one of these quads, select the island, unwrap, follow active quads. And this will generally straighten out all the adjacent quads in an island. Because there was a triangle on top, it's not quite straight, but I can just do this. And that should help me maximize my space. Now, follow active quads isn't a magic method that fixes everything. I did have to go through and manually straighten some of these out, rearrange everything to get them nice and flat as possible. And now we need to find room for everything on the UV map. These rear fenders can't go over top of the stock fenders. It's going to produce some bad outcomes when it comes to applying decals. So I think I am going to be safe to just match the scale as best I can to the originals. My left side can go over to the left, right side into the right. Now I need to double check with the other things that I've unwrapped so far to see how they fit. Looks like this one is good. This one is interfering just a tiny bit. So I'll move that up. Move this part of the wing down. Very good. And now I'll go on with some of the front fenders. Same story with the front. When we apply these fenders in game, they're going to go over top of the original fenders. So we need to find space away from the stock fenders. Thankfully, there is plenty of room. Actually, I'll chuck it up into this corner here. This one might be better off if I flip the UV. Try and slot it in this way. Okay, having a bit of trouble on this side. So while I've still got the front bumper enabled as well, I'm going to move these parts. Let's chuck them down here for now. And hopefully they don't interact with the rear bumper or the side skirt. Okay, a bit of side skirt interaction. I'm going to drag this down a bit. Ah yes, all this rear crap. I can probably get away with just chucking it in here. Now, unwrapping these front fenders, it's producing this bad overlap. And that tells me that some of these edges down here are still connected. So I'm going to introduce some seams. Right about here should do the trick, I think. Let's give that a look. There we go, that's better. And now we have these strips to arrange and scale and all that other fun stuff. When it comes to rearranging UV maps, you are allowed to mirror image. We pass the point where Photoshop liveries is the norm. Either the decal will be applied normally in game and simply appear flipped on the UV image, or in Substance where you can apply our decals normally and they'll appear mirror imaged on the UV. Does not matter. Now, because I've already unwrapped a set of fenders, I'm going to use them as a guide. And I'm going to park these new UVs over top of these new UVs, because you're only going to be running one set of fenders at a time, aren't you? Alright, I've got all my body panels selected, and looking at the UV map, everything is accounted for. There's nothing overlapping. Everything is a good scale. All the UVs are clean. Good, good, good. Now it's on to the next step. Next thing we need to do is backfacing. By backfacing, I mean everything that is blue is visible and everything that is red will be invisible. Obviously, when we're in game, we're going to be able to see some of these red faces from outside the car, so we need to remedy that by producing reverse faces. In the past, I have told people to duplicate their mesh, go in, flip the faces, and then rename this mesh to body underscore no livery. And what this will do was produce a paintable inside with no ability to have decals put on them, but this has created complications when it comes to creating liveries. Now, CARX's solution is to name the insides miscellaneous, and that whole thing gets filled in with some sort of black material. The best we can do, because we don't have the UV map for the miscellaneous, is we're going to create a new material, and we'll call this one Backfaces. And we will paint it black with maximum roughness, and we're going to turn the specular IOR level all the way to 0. So now I have duplicates of the bumpers and skirts. Those duplicates are named Backface. They have their faces flipped, and they each use the Backfaces material. I don't need to do Backfaces for the bonnet or the fenders because we aren't going to see the Backfaces. They're going to be pressed up against the car. Now we can move on to part origins. We can turn the roots back on, and that presents us with all these roots where our body parts are going to locate themselves. The best way to explain part roots is each of these roots is treated as a new world origin. Right now, all of my parts have their origin set to world origin or 000. If I were to grab one of these roots and put my cursor there, if I were to put my front bumper into the game without its origin being set away from 000, it's going to look something like this. It's going to offset it. In order for the part to look properly in game, I've got my front bumper root selected. I can locate my 3D cursor by going into edit mode, highlighting all the vertices, and Shift S, cursor to selected. And then for each of the parts associated with the front bumper, so my back face, my body mesh, and the indicators, if I grab these 3 items, there they are selected there, right click, set origin to 3D cursor, that puts them at the root for the front bumper. Now remember what I said about the front bumper root being a new world origin. When it comes to exporting the front bumper, I need to export it from the world origin. I need to export it in this location. So when it gets into the game and it's locating the part on this origin, remember this is a new world origin. The game is treating this like 000. So when the part gets loaded in, it's going to be in position on the car. So since my front bumper's origin has been set and it's located at world 0, I can grab everything associated with the front bumper and export it as an FBX. So since my front bumper's origin has been set and all the parts are at world 0, I can select everything associated with the front bumper and export it as an FBX. We're going to limit it to selected objects and export. So I'll go through now, set all the origins for the remaining parts. On this particular body kit, I will be assigning the fenders to be used as a door part. In order to do that, I will need to also include the stock doors. And when I'm going to include the stock doors, I need the stock door stitches. So I've split the door mesh, and I've also split the door stitches mesh. The door stitches mesh material isn't important at the moment, and the naming scheme is a rough guide, but we'll be changing these later as well. Because of how I've constructed my bonnet, I'll also be grabbing the stitches for the bonnet. Now, to save myself a bit of hassle when importing things into Unity, I'm going to grab all of the fender meshes, as well as the door and the door stitches, and I'll export all of these as one FBX. We'll be able to separate everything in Unity once we've created prefabs. Alright, that's everything exported from Blender. Time to grab the new Unity SDK for Kino. Here I've downloaded the newest SDK. I'll create a new folder in my Unity projects folder. SDK v4. Gonna drag everything from there into there. My Unity is already set up to use Unity 2023-220F1. There is instructions how to do this on the Kino GitHub. I'm going to add project from disk. Going to locate to SDK v4, add project. We can launch this. It might come up with this. I wish to continue at my own risk. Alright, Unity is finished setting up. So now I'm going to create a new folder for the DMAX. We are going to navigate to the folder where we've been putting all our stuff. Bonnet FBX. Doors, front bumper, rear bumper, skirts, wing. I would like these textures that I've used to come with. The UV layout image is not important. We don't need to use that. And we'll just drag these into the folder. Okay, starting at the left, working our way across, we'll go with bonnet. When we click on the FBX, this comes up. We need to extract all the materials. Simply click this button, select folder, in they come. While we still have the bonnet selected, we're going to click into the model tab, and we need to check this read write tick box. This tells the game that we want to put decals onto this mesh. For this material, it uses a normal map. This one here to be precise. For our normal maps, we need to tell Unity that the texture type is a normal map. This will produce the normals properly in the game. Moving on to the doors and fenders, because we've already got these materials inside the project, we don't need to extract them again. We can just drag the matching materials into these slots. Because fender mesh uses a different name to bonnet mesh, but they use the same texture, I'm just going to drag bonnet mesh into fender mesh and hit apply. Remember to go back into the model tab and tick read write. Then we get to front bumper, which uses our UV unwrap material, but these are some new materials. So we'll apply the UV unwrap material in there and extract the rest. When importing objects into Unity that have materials that uses metallic, they do not automatically set metallic. You have to go through and set those manually. You might have noticed that my indicators have two options, clear and orange. What I can do is duplicate the indicator texture, and I'll rename this one to clears. Now I can drag the clear texture into the base map slot. With all of our imported models selected, we'll drag them into the hierarchy, and then one by one we'll drag them out, which automatically turns them into a prefab. Starting with our first prefab, it's time to start renaming these meshes into their correct names. For parts of the object that are going to receive in-game paint and decals, we need to call it body. For our stitches, we call them body_stitches. This tells the game to automatically assign the stitches material to that mesh. Now we get to the doors. I have all of my body meshes named body, body stitches, and remaining meshes with their own materials named whatever I want to call them. Now, I can't run both sets of fenders at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'll Control D to duplicate the doors prefab. So in the first one, I'm going to get rid of the first mesh that goes inside the fenders and the fenders that go with those meshes. That leaves a second fender and second mesh. Now I can go to the second door prefab. I'll get rid of mesh 2 and the fenders that go with mesh 2. Delete those. And now I have a prefab with the first fender mesh and the fenders that go with. Now I'm up to the front bumper, and in an ideal world I'll be able to teach you how to turn these into emissive lights, but I don't know anything about the emissives just yet. I've been filming for damn near 10 hours. Going into the light side of things would be another whole other video. I'm just going to go ahead with making them as fake ones. So I've got two versions of the front bumper prefab, and everything is named properly in here. I'm going to go into my second one, and clicking on the indicator mesh with the materials tab open, I'm going to drag in the clear material into the indicator slot, and that replaces that material. So now we have two versions of a front bumper. All my prefabs are laid out. Time to make a Kino parts pack meta. We are going to choose car parts. We'll skip target ID for now. Name is going to be S13 D-Max Type 3, because that's what I've made. We'll make the category D-Max Type 3. Put it edited by Noisy. I've just gone ahead and made a quick pack icon to use. Remember, when we drag this image in, we need to set the alpha as transparency. Cool. It's going to look professional now. We'll click back on our meta and drag the icon into there. Now, a new feature in Kino is this checkbox here. If you have this box ticked, it means people can dump your car for making liveries, for example. If you have it unticked, it means they will not be part of the dump. This will make people like me who use Substance Painter to make liveries quite upset, but I understand why it is a feature. It's up to you. Personally, I'm always going to allow my parts to be dumped. Now we start populating the parts list. First element is going to be front bumper. It's going to use front bumper. And the icon can be the one that I've made. I'm going to leave the replacement ID blank. You have the option, however, we'll just turn on the parts ID. And if you so desire, you can choose one of these numbers here to fill in that box. 0 automatically sets it to something. I don't know. Don't care. I never fill it in. So that's our first part done. We're going to press the plus symbol. It's going to bring up another element. Also going to be a front bumper. I'll drag my alternate bumper into that. Done. Element 3 is going to be rear bumper. And so on and so forth. My list is populated with all the parts that I've made. So now I can go back up to target ID. We'll go back to the game. We can grab this ID from the tools, developer tools. There it is right there, car number 9. Chuck a number 9 in there. Now when I put a number in there, if I were to fill this list out after putting that number in, it would be extremely laggy. It's much faster to leave that field as what it was by default. Completely fill out the meta first, then fill this number in last. Clicking away from that list, we can see it here now in the car parts tool builder. But first, I need to grab these details. Okay, that's those done. Now we select a build folder. I am going to navigate to my build folder for everything else. KNPP build, here it is. Copy that URL. Chuck it in there. And now I'm ready to build. There we go. Copy this into the install content folder. And now we'll go into the game and start troubleshooting. Yes, troubleshooting, because something's bound to go wrong. I'm not perfect, I'm only human. Alright. Let's take a look and see what the first issue is. DMAX type 3. Rotation's off. Saw that coming from a mile away. Alright. To fix this, we go back to Unity. Before we do that, looks like I need to rotate it so the back is going upwards. Okay. Into Unity, we'll go to our front bumpers. To fix these rotations, we do not rotate this. We grab everything inside the prefab, not the prefab itself. Now, looking in game, back needs to swing upwards. So we can use the rotation tool. And on this axis, I'm going to hold control so it snaps. And that is 90 degrees. And because I know that needs to fix, we'll go to second front bumper. Do the same. Run another build. Ta-da! Fixed. Looks good. How about the other one? Looks good. We can see the difference in the indicators. Very good. Back faces. Looks like they are dark. Very good. Can't really see it from here. Okay. Onwards. We'll have to rotate the bonnet 180 degrees from where it is now. So we'll just grab all of these, spin them around, run a build. Now the fun new part about Kino is we can select that parts pack and reload it by itself. Much faster loading times, much faster troubleshooting. Very good. Okay, I've gone through the bonnets and I've applied those rotations. Everything looks good. I've got 2 variations with the mesh, 2 variations without the mesh. Looks good. Let's go on to the doors or fenders. Oh, that's very interesting. I took a gamble. It didn't pay off. But it looks like I just need to rotate it 90 degrees. As you can see, the recurring theme is everything rotates by 90 degrees. and eventually it lines up. Hey presto. Before I get too far forward, let's look at the... let me just get rid of my livery template. So now I can apply the decal, and we'll see if everything is working so far. Looks pretty good. It's applying on all the places we expect it to. So far so good. I'll continue rotating the rest of the parts. Okay, everything is rotated. Everything looks good in the UV. We can put something on the side. It doesn't project. Oh, well, it does a bit, but that's the in-game livery editor for you. Can't apply any liveries in-game, but I guarantee we can put some decals on there in substance because we did such a fantastic job doing the UV unwrap. I'll just put this there, give it a mirror. Success! We have a working KNPP body kit. Everything is located nicely. UV maps are great. And we even have options for each of the body parts. Fantastic. I hope this video serves you well, and I hope to see your creations on the CARX modding forums. Have a good one. I'm gonna have dinner and go to fucking bed.